She's like, I'm 18. 18. Oh, jump scare. Hey, welcome or welcome back to my channel. I'm sorry. This week, I am going to be reading books out of my comfort zone. It's more than likely going to be genres, based on genre, because the top two genres that I typically read are thrillers and romance. Don't know why I had to think about it. I'm putting my ranch and my thing in my bob. The first book that I'm going to be starting with, Parable of the Sower by Octavia E. Butler. I think this is like a dystopian, a sci-fi dystopian or something. I think I'd be lying if I said I hadn't read something like this. I'm sure I had to read something like this in high school or school in general. I don't know if this counts, but I do remember that's a dystopian, but I did read Fahrenheit 451 back in 9th grade. Did not like Fahrenheit 451. But I'm gonna give this one a shot. Just to preface, if you've been following along this month, either on my Instagram stories, I made a video about it on TikTok yesterday. Yesterday was January 17th. I have had no 5-star yet. And I spoke about this. I don't know if it's because I've become more picky with how I rate books, or if they just haven't been giving. But no, I think it's because I've become more picky and more confident in my ratings, because a lot of the books that I have read so far would have been 5 stars had I read them in like 2022, not 23. Most of them are 3s and 3.5s and 3.75s. I did get a 4.5, and I think I got 2 4s. Typically, when I'm in this kind of a slump, I will read a book by an author who I love. So that would be either reading a book by CCJ or Danielle Allen. But I'm going to switch it up this time. And I'm going to read books out of my comfort zone. I doubt I'm going to read these books back to back. I don't even have a list. I just know that I need to read this by January 31st. So I can return it. I know nothing about this book besides it being set in 2024, which I think is the coolest thing ever. When global climate change and economic crisis lead to social chaos in the early 2020s, California becomes full of dangers, from pervasive water shortage to masses of vagabonds who will do anything to live to see another day. 15-year-old Lauren Alamina lives inside a gated community with her preacher father, family, and neighbors, sheltered from the surrounding anarchy. In a society where any vulnerability is a risk, she suffers from hyperempathy, a debilitating sensitivity to others' emotions. Precocious and clear-eyed, Lauren must make her voice heard in order to protect her loved ones from the imminent disasters her small community stubbornly ignores. But what begins as a fight for survival soon leads to something much more, the birth of a new faith and a startling vision of human destiny. It sounds like nothing I would read unless it's for school. I'm not gonna lie to you, but I've heard so much great things about Octavia E. Butler, so I'm gonna give it a shot. And is this the one they made a movie out of? Is this the one that's kind of not based, but was inspired? What's that show everyone likes? The Handmaid's Tale? Or is it another one of her books? Because a lot of people compare, like, if you like this, then read this. I don't know how that man didn't hit my mama's car. I have a couple of little updates. Currently still reading Parable of the Sower. Took a little bit of a break. I'm not sure when I last started it. And I'm on page 106. But y'all, this book is not even that long. It's like 300. It's a little over 300 pages. It looks like it's 400. I think it's just because the font is a little big in my opinion. Not that big, but you guys can see. I don't know. I do like that it's very easy to read. I don't know how else to explain it. Like, the plot itself isn't hard to understand, and that's coming from someone who doesn't read sci-fi. That's why I'm bringing it up. There's just something so easy about it, easy about reading it, like I'm comprehending it and everything. I just don't know how to feel, and I feel like there's so much pressure because I've posted about this book and so many people say that Octavia E. Butler has no 5 stars. Everyone gives her books a 5. And that's just making me real nervous because I don't know. So I will say, if I don't give this a 5, I think it's going to be because it's sci-fi. But maybe I might give it a 5 because it is, and the fact that I was able to read it. It's just so realistic in my opinion. I can definitely see this happening, you know what I mean? And that's what's so, like, I know this as sci-fi, but honestly, this could easily fit in the horror genre in my opinion. That's why I had to take a little break, because I'm like, you're scaring me. You're literally scaring me. Why is it I always seem to find a different place in my house to film? We don't know. I have finally finished a book. I think I have a bookmark in here. I have finally finished a book. I'm a little nervous and a little ashamed to give my rating for it, but I think I'm gonna give it a 3.5. On Goodreads, I did round it down to a 3. Don't hate me. First of all, I think the biggest thing is this genre, sci-fi, dystopian, whatever, it's truly out of my comfort zone. And I know that's the point of this video, right? To read books out of my comfort zone. But this genre in particular, I think when it comes to reading books out of my comfort zone, what's best for me is to still stick to the genres that I read, but go based off of plot, or just a sub-genre of a huge genre. So like for mystery, I don't really read a ton of like political mystery or whatever, so read that. Reading an entire genre that I'm not familiar with, no. This book wasn't bad. I definitely see what people fan about this book. I get it. I see the vision. Another thing that didn't help the situation is this book took me 5 days to read. I started it on January 18th and I just finished it yesterday on the 23rd. What made it even better with reading it, I started reading it on the Libby app on my phone. I think the ebook was better for me to read rather than the physical book. It's basically taking place from 2024 until 2027. One thing about me is I love birthdays, birth years. I like seeing who's kind of in my peer group, who's older than me, who am I older than. And since this book takes place in 2024, the characters in here, Lauren, she's around 15, and I'm like, oh, I'm 24 in this book. Technically I was 25 because it starts in July of 2024 and my birthday's in June. So I was like, oh, like I would have been 10 years older than her, you know, had this been real, like had I been in this book. And it goes until 2027, so it would have gone until I was 28, which I think is so scary that we're living in the 2020s. 2010s was cool, but to say that we're living in the 2020s, that sounds dystopian. Okay, now one thing that I did love about it was the I don't know how to say this word. It starts with a C. The found family, basically, right? Because a ton of them, they've all lost people, they've lost families, and just seeing them come together was really nice. Everything about this just felt so real. And I've seen some people say like it's almost like Octavia E. Butler had at the time like insight on the future or something. Now I think what a lot of this hit because of everything going on right now in Palestine, and reading some of these descriptions, I'm like, where have I heard that before? Where have I seen that before? On social media, we're literally seeing this. They have depictions of them walking for miles, having to hunt for food. We're seeing this happen in real life. Maybe not the entire, you know, book, but we're seeing aspects of this. We've been seeing aspects of this in real life. Maybe not in the United States as far as this goes, but I could definitely see this happening like in the near future, right? People sometimes still say, you know, we're living in this already. And I agree to an extent. I think that's one of the reasons why I gave it a 3.5 or a 3, because in my opinion, I eat these movies up. I'm a huge fan of dystopian movies, end of the world movies, be it, you know, aliens or natural disasters. I prefer the natural disasters one. Since we've been living in the 2020s, I mean, it's like we're living in a dystopian. Let's be honest. I feel like a lot of these end of the world movies, apparently books as well, just don't hit because it feels real, right? Back in the 2010s, back in the early 2000s, the 90s, whatever, it was just a movie. Now it's scary. It's literal horror. I think this was just the wrong time to read it. The other thing, more specifically, that threw me, I always say in every single book there's a romance. This book is sci-fi. It still has some kind of a romance in it, very small. But usually when I'm reading books, watching movies as well, watching TV shows, you get these little hints and it's like, oh, they might be together. When I tell you I was like this reading it, what? So our main character Lauren ends up meeting this man, right? They're on their way north. Personally, I don't think anything of it because the way that he's being described, I thought he was 80. I thought he was 80 years old. I believe he's about 51 or 57. I think he's 51. I highlighted it because I told myself to come back and so I could be positive. I guess I'll just mark it. But I'm 100% sure he was 51. All of a sudden, there's a scene later and he's like leaning in close because he's going to tell her something. She just turns her head and kisses him. I was like, wait. Is she not a minor? Because I'm like, well, I forgot at the time that we're moving in time. So I think when they do get together, it is in 2027. His name is Banco. That's his last name. I'm like, okay, well, she must have been around 16 in 2024 at the beginning. So I'm like, well, maybe she's 19. I mean, that doesn't make it any better. He ends up asking her, like, how old are you? And she's like, I'm 18. 18. Oh, jump scare. What? And he literally says, oh, like he was disgusted with himself. Now, mind you, it's the end of the world in this book. You know what I mean? So it's like, there really is nobody. You gotta pick somebody. I guess that's what I got from it. And what's crazy is I used to read age gaps all the time, but 18 and 51. The next book that I'm gonna read, the genre kind of falls into what I stated before. Like when I think about reading now in the future, when I think about reading books out of my comfort zone, I'm gonna kind of still stick with the genres that I dabble in. And one of those is fantasy. I'm not a fantasy reader. I don't like fantasy. More specifically, I loathe YA fantasy. I'm not a fan. I think because YA fantasy authors, for some reason, make their books even more complicated than they have to be. That's just my opinion. Now, I do get a kick out of middle grade fantasy. I love Amari and the Night Brothers. I haven't read Amari and the Great Game just yet, but I do love middle grade fantasy. Obviously, with adult fantasy, as long as it has like some spice in it, I'm cool, I'm fine. YA fantasy, on the other hand, not a fan. So, I actually am in the mood to read Blood Debts. Ever since I bought it, this has been on my radar now for so long. There's just something about this book that makes me want to read it. Low-key, this has been calling my name now. I haven't read a 5-star yet. And what if this fantasy is a 5-star? Can you believe that? I'm going to be doing a little update on Blood Debts while also picking tabs because I am enjoying the hell out of this book. I am on page 119 in chapter 10. And this is the bookmark that I'm using. It's a sticker. I always want to say that. But it's cute. So what is this about? We have two twins. Chris, short for Christina. Clem, short for Clement. It takes place in 2019. And it's the 30-year anniversary of the lynching of Christina and her husband. Not Christina, our main character. Another Christina. And we start off, you know, 30 years later, basically seeing where they are. We have our two main characters, Christina, obviously you can tell who she's named after, and her brother Clement. At the beginning of the story, we find out that their dad has died, I think the year before in 2018, and their mom is very sick. So much so that a doctor has been coming to the house to check on her. And this time when he does come, he ends up telling them that she only has couple of weeks, couple of days to live. In the meantime, Chris has not been doing magic at all. There's a reason. Clem has been trying to do magic to help, you know, the mom, but nothing's been working. So he finally does something, and Chris and the mom are in the mom's room. He goes to put what he made, you know, to help under her bed, but he ends up grabbing a hex doll. And that's the reason why the mom was sick, because someone put a hex on her, whatever the wording is. So she's perfectly fine now. They burned the doll. So now we're trying to figure out who did it. Why did they do it? I don't think I know who the person is. I don't even think we've been introduced to the person. But I think we're gonna also be figuring out what happened to the couple in that newspaper article, who are the grandparents of Chris and Clem. The couple, Christina and I don't remember the husband's name, they are Maria's parents. So Maria is Chris and Clem's mom. She has 4 other sisters. They're not all close anymore. I think it says that they used to live in the same house, but because someone was trying to kill the mom, they need all of the sisters to come together to do some kind of little spell for extra protection. I think for all of them, like Maria and Chris and Clem, because Chris and Clem both have something that was stolen of theirs in their house. In the meantime, there's another character that has a POV, and her name is Valentina. Now Valentina is the ex-friend of Chris. Chris and her do not get along anymore. They're enemies. We find out that Valentina's family, her grandma, her mom, are now head of the gin, what is it called? They are head of the gin, it's gin something. It's like generational magic. And it's mostly the black characters in this book that have it. The people that do light magic are mostly white people. There's another type of magic called like shadow magic. I haven't met anyone that does that yet though. But Valentina's family, her grandma, her mom, are head of their section. So they oversee anyone who wields that kind of magic. So Chris and Clem's family, basically. However, we find out that her grandma, Valentina's grandma, whose name is Lenora, was best friends with Chris and Clem's grandma that was killed, Christina. And Christina was head of the magical group at that time. So I am super excited to continue this because I want to see what's going on. I want to know what's going on with this. I have a feeling, I don't think, again, I said this already, I don't think I've met the person who was after the mom. I don't think I am, unless we're going to have like an Ace of Spades moment. If you know, you know. I started on page 76 on 119. My goal for today, though, is to at least get to part 2. This book has 3 parts. Part 2 is around the halfway mark. It's on page 197. I think it's actually a little past the halfway or something, like by a couple of pages. Is it gonna be a 5-star? I don't know. I have faith that it might, but if not, for sure a 4, but like a good 4. 4s are good anyway, but like 4.75 or something. But I still have quite a few ways to go. I'm just here. So I'm gonna be using a red. I'm gonna be using, I say a red, but like I guess a maroon to go with his jacket and a blue to go with her dress. Hey, so great news. I have finished Blood Debts. I am giving this a 4.75. I wanted to give this a 5 star so bad. I just feel like a 4.75 is the perfect rating for it. And I'm not mad about it because I think honestly, I don't see myself reading 5 stars really. Like 4.75 might be my new 5 star because I mean, I'm rounding it to a 5 regardless, like for Goodreads. The one thing that I did not like about it, which definitely kind of turned me off, I think this could have easily have been a new adult book. Of course you have to park here. I feel like this did not have to be young adult at all. Specifically, the two main characters, Chris and Clem, are 16. At the very beginning of the book, chapter 1, I was getting a little nervous because at chapter 1, introduced to both Clem and Chris, Clem is in his room having had a sleepover with a boo of his, and then Chris is coming out her room to knock on Clem's door, and then her boyfriend is coming out of her room. What in 16-year-old tarnation is this? It was mentioned that I think both characters, the siblings, had never had sex before. However, there's a spicy scene. There is a literal spicy scene. I did not keep track of the chapter. It must be in part 2. And as I'm reading the scene, I'm like, I hope, like, at least be like closed door, like fade to black. And then I kept reading and kept reading, and then it goes that far, and I'm like, I don't think that that was necessary whatsoever. I understand it was to kind of show the connection between like Clem and the guy. Any other YA that I've read like this, there was no sex, there was no spice. Why is there spice in here? That's when I realized, yeah, I just don't think sadly I could give it a 5 because of that. Now the other thing is, this book has multiple POVs. It has Chris and Clem, theirs are in first person, and we have other characters. My favorite character, before I get into that, my favorite character was Ursula. Ursula is Marie's sister, and I think I was calling her Maria at the beginning. Her name is Marie, y'all. I don't know if I said Maria or not, but her name is Marie. Clem and Chris's mom. And that's one of her sisters. I don't know, maybe the second oldest. But my favorite point of view, honestly, was Chris. Because she was the one actively trying to figure out who had tried to kill the mom. I did not like Clem's POV most of the time. Like, I still read it. Like, I enjoyed it. I just didn't like it most of the time. Because his focused more on the romance subplot of the book. That's all fine and dandy. But I don't know. I just feel like I enjoyed the mystery aspect. Personally, I really don't even think that it needed a romance, if I'm being honest. Or like as detailed as it was. Move location. The ending was good. It's one of those things where I guessed what happened at the very beginning. I really don't want to say that the ending was kind of lackluster because I say this all the time. Even if I guessed the ending from jump, you know, the what happened, the whodunit at the very beginning, as long as I enjoyed the journey, it could still be a 5 star. But I don't know, I just feel like I wanted there to be something else. I feel like it was just too obvious. Most of the time when I guess, you know, oh, I think it's this person, and I end up being right, it was still just a guess. You know what I mean? There are still moments in the book where you're kind of second guessing yourself. But in this one, it's like I caught it literally from jump. I'm really excited for the second book. I was gonna wait until I reached page 100, but we're close enough. I'm on page 92 of The Wild Ones. This is day 2 of reading. I'm hoping to read a lot more today. The Wild Ones are basically girls who have tasted the worst of humanity. They've all went through something. At the beginning of this book, we start with Paheli. And she was being raised in a brothel. I don't know how old she was. Her mom ends up selling her to the highest bidder. She is assaulted, and as she runs out and she's on the street somewhere, she bumps into a boy who, I think it was described, he kind of looked the same as her. You know, you could tell he had probably been through something similar. And he shoves a box of stars in her hand. And I think actually when she noticed him, she noticed that he looked, you know, different. He had actual like stars right there, like in his eyes. Something like that. He runs away, and she grabs one of the stars and just grabs it, holds it very tightly in her right hand, and it embeds in her skin. And so by doing that, she becomes this immortal being. Think of like Edward Cullen. Think of the Cullens, Twilight, whatever. She is stuck in that same body, however old she was, but she's growing older mentally. As time goes on, she will run into these other girls who have been in similar situations, and she will give them a star and they become a wild one. They live in something called the Between. Don't ask me what that is. It says it somewhere. But again, this is just out of my comfort zone, so I'm not really remembering some of these things. I am as I'm reading, but like now that I'm not reading, not really. But I still know what I'm talking about. One day, there is someone who's looking for them, and they find them and they're like, hey, such and such is looking for you. They want to talk to you. And it's the boy from the beginning of the book that gave Patelli the stars. His name is Tarana. And Tarana basically tells all of them that he's kind of on the run, or he's been on the run since he first ran into Patelli. He's running from the man who had him. And he basically details his story. So I'm actually just going to read it to you, because I think he does a great job at telling his own story. The stars that they wear on their right palms are his tears. When he's in more pain than he can endure, he sheds a tear that is the purest form of magic that can exist. That's the reason that the man who had him wants him. If consumed, one tear can fuel a middle worlder. They're not human either, but they're not a wild one. I'm gonna just say that. Can fuel a middle worlder for years, and this man intends to use him to harvest as many tears as he can before his body breaks and dies. Obviously it's tears, so he's being tortured basically. They are now going to be on the hunt to try and save him, because if it weren't for him saving Patelli in the first place, wouldn't be here, right? She'd still be a human, and who knows what she would still be going through, and all of the other girls that she has saved herself. It's good. I'm enjoying it. I don't know if it's going to be a 5-star necessarily, because I think it might fall into that same category as Parable of the Sower, where it's just so out of my comfort zone. I don't know if I'll be able to digest it as I should, or as someone else who gets a kick out of this genre. There is a funny part in here. They start talking about them as they are now, because they've stopped aging. And one of the girls is saying, you know what I miss? And she doesn't give them a chance to answer. She says periods. Periods. I miss periods. And so I'm gonna just read this part. We stare at her. Periods. Arium chokes. Legay says periods. And so Cambodia says, kick her out of here. Take her star. I love that type of humor, that type of comedy. There are other parts of the book where you see something like this, and it's a book of memories, and it's basically detailing a little something from each character. Lastly, I did see some complaints about how there being so many characters and they can never remember where they are, like in the book. What I've noticed is Patelli is the only person in the book who I always know when we're in her POV, because it's in first person. Every other section, because there's no chapters, is told in third person, but it feels like someone is telling the story, but it's none of the girls, the 11 or the other 10. So I'm wondering, am I overanalyzing? Am I overthinking it? Or is that like a clue? So maybe there being some kind of a twist in here, or what? We're done. We've come to the end of the video. So I was able to finish The Wild Ones. I finished it yesterday. I think I read about 138 pages in like 2 hours, because I'm like, I do not want to go into today. Today's the 1st of February. I was like, I want to finish this for January. Just do it. I am going to give it, I'm for real crooked. It's okay. I'm gonna give it a 3. Not a bad 3. It's a good 3. This is the perfect example as to why I don't like fantasy. The book wasn't bad. It was just confusing. Now, I think that this book was unique. Now, mind you, I dabble. I feel like I can't really say I'm not a fantasy reader anymore, because I dabble in it, so I'll just say that from now on. I dabble in it. I think it would have been best on audio, as an audiobook. And there is one. I just didn't see a free option. For some reason, stay with me here. I don't know if what I'm about to say makes sense. It makes sense in here, but I'm about to vomit it out. This is a story, not a book. Meaning it's one of those that shouldn't be on paper. It's something that you should listen to, which is why I feel like I should have listened to it as an audiobook rather than reading the words off the page. Now I will say I felt disconnected from the book. I wasn't included in what was going on, if that makes sense. Things were just happening. Things felt summarized. And I don't know, I guess it was the writing style, the way that the story flowed. It just wasn't my cup of tea. I'd say it's one of those threes where, even though I didn't really enjoy it, I feel guilty giving it anything less than a 3. But a 4 would mean that I understood everything. And I didn't understand everything at all. I mean, I get the gist of it. I feel like I understood the basics, right? There's a girl at the beginning of the book who is saved by someone who's also like some kind of fantastical being who cries from his pain, and he has stars, and by putting those stars in your hands, you know, you become this other being as well. But it's one of those fantasy things where it's like, is it truly fantasy or is it trying to tell me something? I feel like it's trying to tell me something. I kept, for the longest time, I didn't actually believe that there were so many different girls, so many different women. I didn't believe it at first. Because I'm like, what if they're trying to tell me, like, because this is the main character, Paheli, this is like all of her fears and stuff. And I'm like, no, like, be for real. Those are people. Like, why would she be looking at so many different ways? And they have people in the back and in the cover. But you know what I mean? It's one of those where it's like, I feel like I'm not fully grasping what needs to be grasped. So for that, I can't give it over a 3. The writing was good. There was a little romance in there. It made me giggle, but little romance that you got in here, that didn't affect the rating. I am excited. I feel like I'm entering my fantasy era. I'm kind of seeing what my tastes are. I think sci-fi is out of the picture. I don't like sci-fi unless it's like spicy or like a middle grade, but like adult sci-fi, like no romance, like it's not truly, you know, like barely a subplot of romance. No, I think that's out the picture. Reading Blood Debts and reading The Wild Ones, both of them being fantasy, I think I'm kind of seeing what I kind of knew already, that I'm more into the action-y fantasies where if you took out whatever's making it fantasy, like the magic or the mythical beings, it would just be a mystery or a thriller, or not really the romance ones. But this one, I believe I said it in here, if you took out the magic, it would be a mystery. Whereas this one, no. And maybe it could be had another author had written it. You know, like an author who I've read before. Like maybe their take on something like this might have been digestible. That's it for today's video. I hope you enjoyed. I kind of did, I'm not gonna lie. I enjoyed reading books out of my comfort zone. That's one way that I'm trying to diversify my reading. You know, just reading other genres besides spicy romances, regular romances, my regular thrillers, and I've been trying to get into fantasies. Bye! Why am I like this? Bye! And now, I think I know what I want to do, but... Okay. Oh wait, maybe I should do this again. I feel like I look like a nut. Wait, that looks dumb. In the back? That looks even dumber. You can't see it anyway. I need to leave space to put the other book. So should I do it? I think I'm gonna put it on top of my head. So do a couple of different poses.